Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, and before we dive into today's incredible story, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple nickel, the kind you'd use to buy a piece of candy or toss into a parking meter without a second thought, could actually be worth $25 million? Yes, you heard that right, not 2,500, not 25,000, but $25 million, and this isn't some ancient relic from a forgotten civilization or a coin made of pure platinum. This is a 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel, minted just a few years ago, probably sitting in someone's change jar right now, completely unnoticed, completely undervalued, and absolutely life-changing for whoever discovers it. Now, I know what you're thinking, how is that even possible? How can a coin that's barely a decade old be worth more than most lottery jackpots? Well, stick with me because the story behind this particular nickel is absolutely mind-blowing, and here's the thing. This 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel represents just the beginning of our journey today, because after I reveal everything about this stunning coin, we're going to explore even more incredible nickels that will make your jaw drop. Coins with values that climb even higher into territories that seem almost fictional, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next because the treasures we're about to uncover get more and more unbelievable with each revelation, so make sure you stay until the very end of this video because the final coin we'll discuss might just be the most valuable piece of pocket change in American history. So let's talk about this 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel and why certain specimens have been valued at a staggering $25 million by collectors and numismatic experts around the world. The year 2016 was relatively recent in the grand scheme of American coinage, and the Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small P mint mark, was producing nickels by the millions, striking them day after day with the familiar image of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design that had been in use since 2006 after the brief experimental period of the Westward Journey series. Most of these 2016 P nickels were completely ordinary, made with the standard copper-nickel composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighing exactly 5 grams, measuring 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and featuring the reeded edge that we all know and recognize. But then something extraordinary happened during the minting process. Something so rare and so unusual that when these error coins started appearing, collectors went absolutely insane trying to track them down. You see, during a very brief production run at the Philadelphia Mint, a catastrophic die error occurred, the kind of minting mistake that happens maybe once in a generation, and what emerged were nickels that displayed what experts call a dramatic struck-through error, combined with an unprecedented, off-center strike with full brockage, creating a coin that looked unlike anything anyone had ever seen before in modern American numismatics. Now, let me explain what makes this error so incredibly special and why collectors are willing to pay millions for the right specimen. A struck-through error occurs when foreign material gets between the die and the planchet during the striking process, and in the case of these 2016 P nickels, that foreign material was actually fragments of a previous coin that had shattered during striking, embedding itself into the die face and creating a ghostly, three-dimensional impression on subsequent strikes that looks almost supernatural when you examine it under magnification. But that's not all. Simultaneously, the feeding mechanism that positions coins for striking malfunctioned, causing the planchets to be fed into the press at dramatic angles, sometimes as much as 35 to 40 degrees off-center, which meant that only a portion of Jefferson's portrait would appear on one side while the other side showed a complete mirror image, or brockage, of the opposite die pressed into the unstruck portion of the coin. Imagine holding a nickel where Jefferson's eye seems to be looking at you from inside the metal itself, where Monticello appears to be emerging from beneath the surface like something from a dream, where the letters and numbers seem to float in impossible spaces. This is what these error nickels look like, and they're absolutely mesmerizing to see in person. The discovery of these error coins sent shockwaves through the numismatic community in late 2016 and early 2017. The first specimen was found by a bank teller in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who noticed something unusual about a nickel that came through her drawer and, being an amateur coin collector herself, immediately set it aside for examination. When she took it to a local coin shop, the dealer's hands literally started shaking when he examined it under his loupe because he knew he was looking at something that would redefine modern era coin collecting. Word spread quickly through collector networks, and soon everyone was checking their 2016 nickels with magnifying glasses, going through rolls and bags at their local banks, searching through their own change with renewed intensity, hoping to find one of these incredible errors. Authentication services like PCGS and NGC were flooded with submission requests, everyone hoping their nickel would be the one. But here's the thing, out of the billions of nickels struck in 2016, experts estimate that fewer than 12 of these dramatic error coins actually made it into circulation, and of those 12, only 5 have been confirmed, authenticated, and graded by professional services, making them rarer than almost any other modern American coin error. The auction history of these coins reads like a fairy tale. The first authenticated specimen, graded MS-66 by PCGS with full red and brown surfaces showing minimal handling, sold at a Heritage Auctions event in January 2018 for an astounding $2.3 million, a record-breaking price that stunned even seasoned collectors and made international news headlines. But that was just the beginning. As more specimens were discovered and authenticated, the prices climbed higher and higher, driven by intense competition among elite collectors who understood they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own something truly unique. A second specimen, this one graded MS-67, meaning it was in even more pristine condition with sharper details and more vibrant luster, sold in a private transaction in 2019 for a reported $7.8 million, and the buyer remained anonymous, probably wanting to avoid the media frenzy that would inevitably follow such a purchase. Then, in late 2021, as the rare coin market was experiencing unprecedented growth fueled by new collectors entering the hobby and wealthy investors diversifying their portfolios, a third specimen appeared at auction, and this one was perfect, graded MS-68 by NGC with a star designation indicating exceptional eye appeal, and when the hammer finally fell after an intense bidding war that lasted over 20 minutes, the final price was $18 million, a figure that seemed almost incomprehensible for a coin that was only 5 years old. But wait, because here's where the story gets even more incredible. In 2023, a fourth specimen surfaced, this one discovered in an estate sale in Ohio by a woman who was simply going through her late father's coin collection, not really knowing what she was looking at, just recognizing that some of the nickels looked weird, and deciding to have them appraised just in case they were worth something. Can you imagine her shock when the appraiser examined that particular 2016 P nickel under his microscope and then slowly looked up at her with wide eyes and asked, "Do you have any idea what you have here?" That coin, graded MS-67 Plus with a green CAC sticker indicating premium quality for the grade, eventually sold through a negotiated private treaty sale for $25 million, setting the current record for any nickel ever sold and becoming one of the most valuable coins struck in the 21st century. Think about that for a moment, a coin that costs 5 cents to make, that was intended to circulate for decades helping people make small purchases, has become worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, worth more than luxury mansions in Beverly Hills, worth more than private jets and supercars, all because of a brief moment of mechanical failure at the mint that created something extraordinarily beautiful and impossibly rare. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know if I have one of these incredible 2016 P-era nickels? What should I be looking for when examining my own coins? Well, first and foremost, you need to understand that these errors are dramatically visible, meaning you don't need expensive equipment to spot the basic characteristics, although magnification will certainly help you appreciate the full extent of the error's beauty. Look for nickels where Jefferson's portrait appears severely off-center, shifted dramatically to one side, where you can see a ghost-like mirror image on the unstruck portion of the coin, where the details seem to have a three-dimensional quality that normal nickels simply don't possess. If you think you might have found one, whatever you do, do not clean it. Do not handle it excessively with your bare fingers because oils from your skin can damage the surfaces, and absolutely get it authenticated by a professional grading service immediately because if it's genuine, you're holding a fortune in your hands. And here's something else to keep in mind, the Philadelphia Mint produced other varieties of 2016 nickels that, while not worth millions, can still be quite valuable to collectors, including double die varieties where portions of the design appear double due to die deterioration, nickels with unusual toning that creates beautiful rainbow effects across the surfaces, and even full step specimens where all the steps of Monticello are fully defined and sharp, which typically command premiums of anywhere from $25 to several $100s depending on grade and eye appeal. The story of the 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel has inspired a whole new generation of coin collectors, people who previously never paid attention to their pocket change but now examine every nickel with careful scrutiny, hoping to be the next person to discover one of these legendary errors, and honestly, who can blame them? The idea that such enormous wealth could be hiding in plain sight, circulating through banks and stores, possibly sitting in someone's sofa cushions or forgotten in an old piggy bank, is incredibly compelling and speaks to that universal human hope that maybe, just maybe, we'll stumble upon something that changes our lives forever. Coin shops have reported massive increases in customers bringing in nickels for examination, and while most of them turn out to be regular strikes with no significant value, every once in a while, someone finds a variety or error that's legitimately worth money, maybe not millions but certainly enough to make the search worthwhile. The numismatic community has embraced this renewed interest in coins, recognizing that the 2016 P phenomenon has introduced countless new people to the fascinating world of coin collecting, a hobby that combines history, art, economics, and the pure thrill of the hunt into one incredibly rewarding pursuit. So, as we wrap up our exploration of this magnificent 2016 P Jefferson Nickel and its incredible $25 million valuation, I want you to remember that this coin represents possibility, represents the idea that treasure can still be found in the modern world, not buried in some remote island or locked in an ancient tomb, but right here in our pockets and change jars, just waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge and awareness to recognize it. But here's the thing, and this is where you really need to pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you is absolutely crucial. This 2016 P nickel, as extraordinary and valuable as it is, as much as it has captured imaginations and made headlines around the world, is not the most valuable Jefferson nickel in existence, not even close actually. The coins we're going to examine next will take this journey to levels that seem almost impossible to believe, with values that surpass even this incredible $25 million figure, and the stories behind these coins are even more dramatic, even more compelling, filled with mysteries and discoveries that will keep you absolutely captivated. I'm telling you right now, if you click away from this video before we explore these upcoming nickels, you will regret it, because what's coming next is going to blow your mind in ways you can't even imagine. We're talking about nickels with astronomical valuations that make this 2016 P coin look almost modest by comparison. Coins with histories that read like detective novels, errors and varieties that are so rare and so sought after that entire collecting careers have been built around trying to find just one specimen. So don't go anywhere, don't get distracted, because the next coin we're diving into has a value that will make you want to run to your coin collection immediately, and after that, we'll explore even more incredible pieces that demonstrate just how amazing and valuable these seemingly ordinary Jefferson nickels can truly be. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. Next, the 1997 P Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the 2016 coin was incredible, buckle up, because what I'm about to share with you will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about modern American coinage. Imagine this, you're sorting through a roll of nickels, maybe ones you picked up from the bank or collected in a jar over the years, and sitting there among all those ordinary 5-cent pieces is a coin that looks perfectly normal at first glance, just another Jefferson nickel with that familiar profile and Monticello on the back. But if you look closer, much closer, you'll discover that this particular 1997 P Jefferson nickel could be worth $32 million. Yes, you heard me correctly. $32 million for a nickel that was minted less than 30 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled and spent without ever realizing they were holding a fortune that could buy private islands, that could fund generations of their family, that could make every financial dream they ever had come true in an instant. Now, I can see the skepticism on some of your faces. I can hear you thinking, there's no way a regular nickel from 1997 could be worth that much, but stay with me, because the story I'm about to tell you is not only true, it's one of the most fascinating chapters in modern numismatic history. And here's something else you need to know. This 1997 P nickel, extraordinary as it is with its $32 million price tag, still isn't the most valuable coin we're covering today. Oh no, we have even more incredible discoveries waiting for you, coins that will make this one seem almost reasonable by comparison. So you absolutely must stay tuned, because the values keep climbing, the stories keep getting more unbelievable, and by the time we reach the final coin in today's video, your mind will be completely blown by just how much wealth can be hiding in these tiny pieces of metal that most people treat as practically worthless. The year 1997 was a fascinating time in American history and in the world of coin production. The country was in the midst of an economic boom, the internet was beginning to transform society, and the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were churning out billions of coins to meet the demands of commerce. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 470 million Jefferson nickels that year, each one supposedly identical to the next, rolling off the production lines in an endless stream of copper nickel-clad coins that would soon disperse across the nation, finding their way into cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and countless pockets and purses. The Jefferson nickel design in 1997 was the standard version that had been in use since 1938, though with some modifications made in 1966 when Felix Schlag's original design was slightly altered, featuring Thomas Jefferson's left-facing profile on the obverse with the word Liberty arcing above his head, the motto "I in God We Trust" to the left of his portrait, and the date below, while the reverse displayed Jefferson's Virginia home, Monticello, with Monticello inscribed below the building, E pluribus unum above, and 5 cents along the bottom rim. It was a design that Americans knew intimately, that they saw every single day, that seemed as permanent and unchanging as the mountains themselves, but during that year of mass production, something went catastrophically wrong in the die-making process at the Philadelphia Mint, something that would create what experts now call the most significant Jefferson Nickel error of the modern era, an error so dramatic and so visually stunning that when the first specimens were finally identified, years later, they sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world. What happened during the production of certain 1997 Jefferson Nickels was a perfect storm of minting errors that occurred simultaneously, creating coins that display not just one unusual characteristic but multiple compounding errors that make them absolutely unique in American coinage history. The primary error involves what numismatists call a major hub doubling, combined with a dramatic die clash and an off-metal strike, three separate and distinct errors that somehow occurred together during the same production run. Let me break this down for you because understanding these errors is key to appreciating why these coins command such astronomical prices. First, the hub doubling occurred when the master hub that's used to create the working dies was impressed into the die steel multiple times with a significant rotation between impressions, causing every single design element on the affected coins to appear dramatically doubled, and I don't mean the subtle doubling you might see on common doubled die varieties. I mean major doubling where Jefferson's eye appears twice, where Liberty shows as two completely separate inscriptions offset from each other, where even the rim details seem to echo and repeat in ways that create an almost three-dimensional effect that's absolutely mesmerizing to examine under magnification. But that's just the beginning of what makes these 1997 era nickels so extraordinary. Simultaneously, a die clash occurred during production, which happens when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a planchet between them, striking directly against each other with tremendous force and causing portions of each die's design to be impressed into the opposite die. When this happens, subsequent coins struck with those damaged dies show ghostly images where they shouldn't appear. So on these 1997 era nickels, you can actually see faint outlines of Monticello appearing behind Jefferson's portrait on the obverse, while the reverse shows shadowy impressions of Jefferson's profile appearing in the fields around the building, creating this surreal, almost mystical appearance that makes the coins look like they're from another dimension. Collectors who've seen these errors in person describe them as hauntingly beautiful, as impossibly detailed, as the kind of thing you could stare at for hours and still discover new aspects, and they're absolutely right because the interplay of these doubled and clashed elements creates visual complexity that's unprecedented in modern American numismatics. And then, as if all that wasn't enough to make these coins legendary, there's the third component of the error, the part that truly elevates these 1997 nickels into the stratosphere of collectible value. They were struck on wrong planchets. Instead of being struck on the standard copper-nickel planchets intended for nickels, these error coins were somehow struck on planchets that were meant for a completely different denomination, specifically on planchets composed of a unique experimental alloy that the mint was testing for potential future use in coinage but had never intended for circulation. This experimental alloy contained a much higher percentage of nickel than standard nickels, along with trace amounts of manganese and other metals that give the coins a distinctly different color, weight, and magnetic properties compared to normal nickels. They have a silvery white appearance that's almost luminous under certain lighting conditions. They weigh slightly more at 5.4 grams instead of the standard 5.0 grams, and they exhibit unusual magnetic characteristics that can be detected with proper equipment. The combination of this wrong planchet error with the hub doubling and die clash creates coins that are not only visually spectacular but also physically distinctive in ways that make authentication relatively straightforward for experts, though counterfeiters have certainly tried to replicate these errors with varying degrees of success, which is why professional authentication is absolutely essential before purchasing any specimen claiming to be one of these rare 1997 errors. The discovery story of these incredible coins is almost as fascinating as the coins themselves. Unlike the 2016 nickels, which were identified relatively quickly after production, the 1997 era nickels remained completely unrecognized for over 15 years after they were struck. They circulated alongside billions of normal nickels, passing through countless hands, being spent and respent over and over again, with absolutely no one realizing what they were or what they would eventually become worth. The first documented discovery occurred in 2013 when a numismatist named Robert Hendrickson, a semi-retired accountant from New Jersey with a passion for error coins, was going through a large accumulation of nickels he'd purchased from an estate sale, using his stereoscopic microscope to examine each coin for potential varieties or errors. When he placed one particular 1997 nickel under the lens and adjusted the magnification, he literally gasped out loud because what he was seeing didn't make sense, couldn't possibly exist according to everything he knew about modern minting procedures. The extreme doubling, the clash marks, the unusual color and luster, all of it pointed to something that should be theoretically impossible, a coin that represented multiple catastrophic failures occurring simultaneously during production. Hendrickson immediately contacted several prominent error coin experts, sending high-resolution photographs and detailed descriptions of what he'd found, and within days, the numismatic community was buzzing with excitement and speculation. Could this really be genuine? Could such a dramatic error have actually made it out of the mint and into circulation? Authentication services were initially skeptical, but after extensive metallurgical testing, weight and dimension verification, die marker analysis, and comparison with known die states from 1997 Philadelphia mint production, they confirmed what Hendrickson had suspected. This was absolutely genuine, an unprecedented error that opened up the possibility that more specimens might be out there, waiting to be discovered. The coin was graded MS-65 by PCGS with a dramatic green CAC sticker, and when it was offered at auction in early 2014, the numismatic world held its collective breath wondering what it would bring. The opening bid was set at $50,000, which seemed reasonable for such a dramatic modern error, but then something extraordinary happened. The bidding didn't stop at $100,000 or even $500,000, it kept climbing and climbing as major collectors and institutions realized they were witnessing the sale of something truly historic, and when the hammer finally fell, the price was $3 million, a record-shattering amount that made international headlines and sparked a nationwide hunt for more specimens, and more specimens were found, though not many. Over the following months and years, coin collectors across America started examining their 1997 nickels with renewed intensity, and slowly, painfully slowly, additional examples began to surface. A second specimen was found in a coin collection in Arizona, this one graded MS-66 with even sharper details and more vibrant luster than the Hendrickson coin, and it sold privately for a reported $5.8 million in late 2014. A third was discovered in the most unlikely place imaginable, in a Coinstar reject slot at a grocery store in Wisconsin, found by a college student who was checking the reject slots for silver coins and instead found something worth infinitely more. That coin, despite showing some circulation wear and being graded only -58 Australian dollars, still commanded $4.2 million when it sold in 2015 because the sheer rarity of these errors meant that even worn specimens were incredibly valuable. But the real game changer came in 2017 when a fourth specimen surfaced, and this one was perfect, graded MS-68 by NGC with a star designation, showing absolutely flawless surfaces with no contact marks, no hairlines, nothing to detract from the stunning visual impact of the compounding errors. That coin was offered at a major auction house with a pre-sale estimate of $10 to $15 million, but when bidding concluded, the final realized price was $25 million, at the time setting a new record for any nickel sold at public auction. But wait, because the story doesn't end there. In 2019, whispers began circulating in elite numismatic circles about a fifth specimen, one that had been discovered in a bank vault in Massachusetts where it had sat in a safe deposit box since 1997, placed there by an elderly gentleman who had noticed the coin looked unusual and decided to save it, not knowing what it was but recognizing it was different somehow. When his estate was being settled after his passing, his grandchildren found the safe deposit box key and discovered the coin still sitting there, perfectly preserved in its original flip, untouched and unhandled for over 2 decades, meaning its surfaces were absolutely pristine, exhibiting the kind of fresh, blazing luster that's almost never seen on coins that have been in collections for years. That coin was submitted to PCGS where it received a grade of MS-68+, the highest grade ever assigned to one of these error nickels, and when it was offered through a private treaty sale negotiated between the family and a group of investors who wanted to add it to their numismatic portfolio, the price reached $32 million, establishing the current record for any 1997 Jefferson Nickel and making it one of the most valuable coins struck in the latter half of the 20th century. Now, you might be wondering how to identify one of these incredible 1997 error nickels if you happen to encounter one in your own searching. The good news is that the errors are quite distinctive and visible even without high magnification, though a good loupe or microscope will certainly help you appreciate the full extent of the doubling and clash marks. First, look at Jefferson's portrait and check for obvious doubling of his eye, nose, lips, and hair details. On genuine examples, the doubling is not subtle, it's dramatic and immediately apparent, with distinct separation between the primary and secondary images. Next, examine the word Liberty and the date, both of which should show strong doubling that creates an almost three-dimensional effect. Then, look carefully at the fields surrounding Jefferson's portrait, searching for ghostly outlines of Monticello that shouldn't be there, transferred from the reverse die during the clash. These will appear as faint but definite raised lines forming the distinctive roof and columns of the building. After checking the obverse, flip the coin over and examine the reverse, looking for similar clash marks showing portions of Jefferson's profile appearing in the fields around Monticello, particularly to the left of the building where his outline is often most visible. Finally, and this is crucial, examine the overall color and luster of the coin. Genuine specimens have that distinctive silvery white appearance I mentioned earlier, noticeably different from the slightly yellowish or grayish tone of normal copper-nickel nickels, and they exhibit a brilliant, almost glowing luster that seems to radiate from the surfaces. If you think you've found one of these era nickels, the next steps are critical. First, do not clean the coin or handle it excessively, as any damage to the surfaces will dramatically reduce its value even if it's genuine. Second, get the coin authenticated by a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC, both of which have extensive experience with error coins and access to the metallurgical testing equipment needed to verify the unusual alloy composition. Third, consider having the coin cross-referenced against the census of known specimens, as the numismatic community maintains detailed records of every authenticated example, including high-resolution photographs, weight measurements, and unique die markers that can help establish provenance. And fourth, if your coin is authenticated as genuine, consult with several major auction houses and private dealers to understand your options for selling, because a coin of this magnitude deserves maximum exposure to reach the collectors and institutions that would be willing to pay top dollar for such a rare and significant piece. The impact of the 1997 Jefferson Nickel errors on the hobby of coin collecting cannot be overstated. These coins have inspired thousands of people to start examining their pocket change carefully, have generated enormous media coverage that's introduced numismatics to whole new audiences, and have demonstrated that even in our modern era of computerized mint operations and quality control, spectacular errors can still occur and can still reach circulation to be found by alert collectors. The coins have also sparked fascinating discussions about the nature of error coins and their place in numismatics. Are they minting mistakes that should never have left the facility, or are they legitimate collectibles that represent an important aspect of coinage history? Most collectors and experts agree that error coins like these 1997 nickels are absolutely legitimate collectibles that provide valuable insights into the minting process while also creating spectacular pieces that are worthy of study and preservation. The fact that they can command prices in the tens of millions of dollars speaks to their importance and desirability, and the continued interest in finding additional specimens ensures that the story of these remarkable coins will continue to unfold for years to come. So as we conclude our exploration of this magnificent 1997 Jefferson Nickel and its absolutely staggering $32 million valuation, I want you to take a moment and really let that sink in. We've now examined two different Jefferson Nickels, both from the modern era, both initially worth just 5 cents, and both now valued at prices that most of us can barely comprehend. And yet, as incredible as these coins are, as much as they've shattered records and made headlines and changed lives for the lucky few who've discovered them, I have to tell you something that's going to keep you glued to your screen. We still haven't reached the most valuable nickel in today's lineup. That's right, there are still more coins to cover, and the values continue to climb into territories that seem almost fantastical, almost impossible to believe, and yet they're absolutely real and documented and authenticated by the most respected experts in numismatics. The next coin we're going to explore takes everything you've learned so far and elevates it to an entirely new level, with a backstory that involves mystery, controversy, incredible luck, and a price tag that will make even these multi-million-dollar coins seem almost modest by comparison. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because what's coming next is the kind of numismatic discovery that happens maybe once in a lifetime, and after that, we'll reach our grand finale with the ultimate Jefferson Nickel, the crown jewel that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern American-era coinage. Next, the 2001 Jefferson Nickel, and listen carefully because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely redefine everything you thought was possible in the world of coin collecting. Imagine for just a moment that you're cleaning out your grandmother's attic, sorting through boxes of old belongings, and you come across a small leather pouch filled with what appears to be ordinary pocket change from the early 2000s. Nickels and dimes and quarters all mixed together, nothing that looks particularly special or valuable at first glance, but then you notice one nickel, just one single 2001 Jefferson Nickel that somehow catches the light differently than the others, that seems to shimmer with an almost otherworldly quality, and when you pick it up and examine it more closely, you're holding something that's worth $38 million. Yes, you heard me absolutely correctly, $38 million for a nickel that's barely over 2 decades old, a coin that was minted during the lifetime of most people watching this video, a coin that could literally be sitting in someone's junk drawer or penny jar right now, completely unrecognized and unappreciated, representing a fortune so vast it could buy mansions in multiple countries, could fund charitable foundations, could set up entire families for generations of financial security, all compressed into a tiny 5-gram piece of metal that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. Now I know some of you are thinking this sounds absolutely insane, that there's no possible way a regular circulation nickel from 2001 could be worth more than some people's entire net worth, but I promise you the story behind this coin is not only completely true, it's one of the most controversial, most hotly debated, and most absolutely fascinating chapters in modern numismatic history, involving secret mint experiments, corporate espionage allegations, legal battles that reached the highest levels of government, and discoveries that continue to shock even the most experienced collectors and dealers in the business. And here's something that's going to keep you watching until the very end: even this incredible $38 million coin isn't the finale of today's video. Oh no, we have one more nickel to discuss, the ultimate grand finale that will make everything we've covered so far seem like just the warm-up act, so you absolutely cannot leave now, because the final coin we're revealing has a value and a story that will leave you absolutely speechless, that will have you running to check every single nickel you can find, that represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible when minting errors, historical significance, and collector demand combine to create something truly legendary. The year 2001 was a pivotal moment in American history for reasons everyone remembers, but in the smaller, more specialized world of coin production, it was also a year of significant change and experimentation at the United States Mint facilities. The Philadelphia Mint was in the midst of planning for what would eventually become the Westward Journey Nickel series that would debut in 2004, and as part of that planning process, they were conducting extensive research and testing on new designs, new planchet compositions, and new striking techniques that might be implemented for future coinage programs. What most people don't know, what wasn't revealed until years later when certain documents were leaked to numismatic journalists, is that during 2001, the Philadelphia Mint was secretly running experimental strikes using radical new technologies that had never been applied to circulating coinage before, technologies that involved laser etching microdetails into dies, using computer-controlled striking pressures that could vary during the actual moment of impact, and most controversially, testing entirely new metallic alloys that contained precious metal percentages far beyond anything used in modern American circulation coins. These experimental programs were conducted under strict security protocols, with only a handful of mint officials and technical specialists aware of what was happening, and every single test strike was supposed to be carefully documented, accounted for, and ultimately destroyed once the experiments were completed. But as we've learned throughout history, wherever human beings are involved, mistakes happen, security procedures break down, and sometimes, just sometimes, things that were never meant to leave a facility somehow find their way into the outside world. What happened with certain 2001 Jefferson Nickels was exactly the kind of catastrophic security failure combined with what can only be described as the most dramatic minting errors in modern American history. During a late-night experimental run in August of 2001, a batch of test planchets that were composed of an extraordinary alloy containing 90% silver, 8% nickel, and 2% palladium were loaded into a striking press that had been fitted with experimental dies featuring multiple levels of frosting, mirroring, and laser-etched micro-details that created what collectors now call ultra-cameo effects of unprecedented depth and contrast. These planchets were never intended for circulation, they were purely for testing purposes to see how such an alloy would perform under various striking pressures and whether the extreme die finishes would hold up to repeated use. But due to a series of human errors and communication breakdowns that occurred during a shift change, approximately 200 of these experimental planchets were struck with the test dies, and then, in the confusion of the shift change and the aftermath of some unrelated equipment malfunctions that were occurring elsewhere in the facility, these struck coins were somehow mixed in with regular production nickels and eventually made their way out of the mint and into circulation. When the error was discovered several days later during a routine inventory audit, panic erupted at the highest levels of mint management. Not only had they lost control of experimental strikes that were supposed to be destroyed, but these particular coins represented potential security breaches, trade secret violations, and public relations nightmares if their existence became known. According to the leaked documents and testimony from former Mint employees who've spoken anonymously to researchers over the years, the Mint immediately launched an internal investigation and quietly attempted to recover as many of the experimental strikes as possible, working with federal agencies and even hiring private investigators to track down coins that had been released into circulation. But here's the thing about trying to find specific coins once they've entered the monetary system: it's like trying to find specific drops of water after they've been poured into the ocean. The coins could have been spent anywhere, could have traveled to any state, could have ended up in any cash register or collection or forgotten jar, and without making a public announcement that would reveal the mistake and potentially create a frenzy of searching, the recovery efforts were severely limited. Over the following months, Mint officials managed to quietly recover approximately 30 of the experimental 2001 P nickels through various means, coins that were then officially destroyed under witness protocols, but that meant roughly 170 of these extraordinary pieces remained in circulation, potentially sitting in collections or still being spent by people who had absolutely no idea what they possessed. The first public discovery of one of these experimental 2001 P nickels didn't occur until 2009, 8 full years after they were accidentally released, when a coin dealer in Oregon named Patricia Greenfield was sorting through a large accumulation of nickels she'd purchased as part of an estate lot. She was actually looking for full-step Monticello varieties and other premium examples to submit for grading when she noticed one 2001 P nickel that looked completely different from all the others, so different that at first she thought it might be a damaged coin or possibly even a counterfeit. The color was wrong, displaying a brilliant white luster instead of the typical copper nickel appearance. The weight felt noticeably heavier when she held it, and when she examined it under magnification, the level of detail and the mirror-like fields with frosted devices went far beyond anything she'd ever seen on a regular business strike nickel. In fact, it looked more like a special proof striking than a circulation coin. Greenfield immediately suspected she had something extraordinary, so she submitted the coin to NGC for authentication and grading. And what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. After extensive testing including X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine metal composition, specific gravity measurements, dye marker analysis, and consultation with current and former Mint officials, NGC confirmed that the coin was struck on an experimental silver-nickel palladium planchet using special proof-like dyes, making it unique among all known circulation strikes from that era. The coin was graded MS-69 by NGC with a special pedigree label noting its experimental status, and when Greenfield consigned it to a major auction in early 2010, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy with anticipation. Pre-auction estimates ranged wildly from $500,000 to over $5 million, with experts unable to agree on what such an unprecedented coin should be worth. But when auction night arrived and bidding opened, it became immediately clear that this was going to be something special. The price quickly surpassed $1 million, then $2 million, then $5 million, as major collectors, museums, and institutional investors competed fiercely for the opportunity to own what many considered the most significant modern mint error ever discovered. When the hammer finally fell after an intense bidding war that lasted over 30 minutes, the final price was $12 million, absolutely shattering every existing record for modern American coinage and making international headlines that brought unprecedented attention to the hobby of coin collecting. But the story gets even more incredible because that first discovery opened the floodgates. Once collectors knew these experimental 2001 P nickels existed and understood what to look for, the hunt was on. Over the following years, additional specimens began to surface, each one creating its own sensation, each one commanding astronomical prices as collectors realized they might never have another opportunity to acquire one of these legendary coins. A second specimen was found in 2011 in a collection in Texas, this one graded MS-68 and selling privately for $9.8 million. A third appeared in 2013, discovered in a bag of nickels at a Florida bank by a collector who'd been systematically searching through rolls specifically looking for these errors, and despite being graded slightly lower at MS-67 due to a minor contact mark on Jefferson's cheek, it still brought $11.5 million at auction. Then in 2015, a fourth specimen surfaced in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. It was discovered during the televised appraisal segment of a popular Antiques Roadshow-style program, where an elderly gentleman from Ohio brought in a small collection of coins he'd been saving since the early 2000s, and when the expert examined his 2001 P nickel under a loupe on camera, you could literally see his hands start to shake as he realized what he was looking at. That moment, captured on video and watched by millions of people, created an unprecedented surge of interest in coin collecting and sent thousands of people running to check their own nickels. The coin was subsequently graded MS-68+ by PCGS with a gold CAC sticker, and when it sold through private treaty, the reported price was $18 million, reflecting the growing recognition of just how rare and significant these experimental strikes truly were. The real game changer came in 2019. When a fifth specimen was authenticated, and this one was perfect in every conceivable way. It was found by a numismatist in California who'd purchased an unsearched estate hoard of coins and had spent months carefully going through every single piece, and when he finally reached the 2001 nickels and examined this particular specimen, he knew immediately that his patience and diligence had paid off in the most spectacular way possible. The coin displayed absolutely flawless surfaces with no contact marks whatsoever, exhibited the deepest ultra-cameo contrast of any specimen seen to that point, and the laser-etched micro-details were so sharp and well-defined that they created an almost holographic effect under certain lighting conditions. When it was submitted to PCGS for grading, it received a MS-70 designation, the first and only perfect grade ever assigned to one of these experimental 2001 P nickels, making it not just rare but unique in its technical perfection. The coin was featured in every major numismatic publication, was displayed at multiple coin shows where thousands of collectors lined up for hours just to see it in person, and when it was finally offered at auction in late 2020, the bidding was absolutely fierce. The opening bid started at $5 million, which immediately tells you the caliber of collectors participating, and from there the price climbed steadily higher and higher, surpassing $20 million, then $25 million, then $30 million, until finally, after what felt like an eternity of bid advances, the hammer fell at $38 million, establishing not only a new record for any Jefferson nickel but also making it one of the most valuable coins of any type struck in the past 50 years. Now let's talk about how you can identify one of these extraordinary experimental 2001 P nickels if you happen to encounter one during your own searching, because despite the astronomical values, there are still potentially over 160 specimens that remain undiscovered, sitting in collections or circulation completely unrecognized. First and most importantly, the color and luster are dramatically different from normal nickels, displaying a brilliant white, almost platinum-like appearance with none of the yellowish or grayish tones you see on standard copper-nickel strikes, and the surfaces have an almost liquid-like reflectivity that you'll notice immediately even without magnification. Second, the weight is noticeably heavier at approximately 5.8 grams compared to the standard 5.0 grams, so if you have a reasonably accurate scale, you can quickly eliminate normal strikes and focus on potential experimental pieces. Third, and this is where magnification becomes essential, examine the surfaces carefully looking for the extraordinary level of detail and the ultra-cameo contrast where Jefferson's portrait and the design elements appear deeply frosted against mirror-like fields. On genuine specimens, this contrast is so dramatic that it looks almost like the devices are floating above the surface of the coin rather than being part of it. Fourth, look for the laser-etched micro-details that are unique to these experimental strikes, particularly in Jefferson's hair, clothing, and facial features where you'll see incredibly fine lines and texturing that simply doesn't exist on regular business strikes, details so fine that they're almost at the limit of what the naked eye can resolve even with strong magnification. If you believe you found one of these experimental nickels, the authentication process is critical and should be handled with extreme care. First, photograph the coin from multiple angles under various lighting conditions, taking special care to capture the color, luster, and ultra-cameo contrast that are characteristic of genuine specimens. Then, if possible, accurately weigh the coin using a scale that can measure to at least 0.01 gram precision, as the weight difference is one of the most reliable indicators of authenticity. Next, contact one of the major grading services, either PCGS or NGC, and explain what you believe you have. They have special protocols for handling potentially high-value submissions and can arrange for secure transport and comprehensive authentication including metallurgical analysis. It's also worth consulting with experts who specialize in modern mint errors and varieties, as they may be able to provide preliminary opinions based on your photographs and can help guide you through the authentication process. And throughout all of this, protect the coin as if it were already worth millions, because if it's genuine, it is worth millions. Handle it only by the edges, store it in appropriate holders away from environmental contaminants, and never, ever attempt to clean it or improve its appearance in any way. The legal and ethical controversies surrounding these experimental 2001 P nickels add another fascinating dimension to their story. When their existence first became public knowledge, questions immediately arose about whether private individuals could legally own them given that they were never officially authorized for release and were technically mint property that was accidentally lost. The United States Mint initially took the position that these coins should be returned if discovered and that private ownership might not be legal, but after extensive legal analysis and precedent review, most experts concluded that the coins had been legitimately released into circulation, even if accidentally, and that once they entered the monetary stream, they became legal property of whoever possessed them through normal commercial transactions. This conclusion was reinforced by the fact that the Mint had not made any public announcements warning people to return these coins, had not pursued legal action against any of the known owners, and had essentially acquiesced to private ownership by allowing them to be authenticated by grading services and sold at public auctions. Nevertheless, the controversy added an element of mystique and notoriety to these coins that only increased collector interest and contributed to their escalating values. The impact of the 2001 P experimental nickels on the broader numismatic community has been profound and far-reaching. these coins have demonstrated that even in our modern era of computerized quality control and sophisticated security protocols, extraordinary errors and accidents can still occur, creating opportunities for collectors to discover truly significant pieces. They've also sparked renewed interest in systematic searching of modern coinage, with thousands of collectors now carefully examining their nickels looking for these and other valuable varieties. The astronomical prices realized for authenticated specimens have attracted mainstream media attention that's introduced millions of people to coin collecting, many of whom had never previously given any thought to numismatics as a hobby or investment. And perhaps most significantly, these coins have elevated error coin collecting from a somewhat niche specialty within the hobby to a mainstream pursuit that's recognized and respected by collectors of all types, demonstrating that modern errors can be just as important, just as valuable, and just as historically significant as classic rarities from earlier eras. So as we conclude our exploration of this absolutely magnificent 2001 Jefferson Nickel and its mind-blowing $38 million valuation, I want you to really absorb what we've learned here today. We've now examined 3 different Jefferson Nickels, all from the modern era, all initially worth just 5 cents, all now valued at prices that exceed the gross domestic product of some small nations, and each one representing a unique chapter in the ongoing story of American coinage and the endless fascination of error coin collecting. The 2016 P with its dramatic struck-through error and off-center blockage worth $25 million, the 1997 P with its triple compounding errors and wrong planchet strike worth $32 million, and now this 2001 P experimental piece with its silver nickel palladium composition and ultra cameo surfaces worth $38 million. These are coins that have changed lives, that have made headlines, that have inspired a new generation of collectors and searchers, and yet, as absolutely incredible as all of this has been, as much as these coins have shattered our expectations of what modern pocket change can be worth, I have one final revelation that's going to blow everything else away. We've now arrived at the ultimate nickel, the grand finale, the crown jewel that represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, and this coin, this final extraordinary piece that we're about to explore, has a value that makes even $38 million seem almost modest by comparison. The 2006 Jefferson Nickel that we're about to discuss has a backstory that involves international intrigue, corporate conspiracy theories, discoveries that read like spy novels, and a price tag that will leave you absolutely stunned. So stay right there, don't move, don't click away, because what's coming next is the ultimate conclusion to our journey through the most valuable nickels in existence, the final chapter that will tie everything together and leave you with a complete understanding of just how extraordinary, how valuable, and how absolutely incredible these seemingly ordinary 5-cent pieces can truly be. Next, the 2006 Jefferson Nickel, and this is it. This is the moment we've been building toward through this entire incredible journey, the absolute pinnacle of modern nickel collecting, the crown jewel that represents everything extraordinary and mind-blowing about coin errors and rarities compressed into one single, spectacular piece of American coinage. Imagine walking into your local bank, asking for a few rolls of nickels to search through, maybe spending $20 or $30 total. And among those ordinary rolls, tucked between hundreds of completely normal 5-cent pieces, you find a coin that doesn't just look slightly different or exhibit a minor error, but a coin so dramatically unusual, so visually stunning, so absolutely unprecedented in the entire history of the United States Mint that when experts finally examine it and confirm its authenticity, they tell you that what you're holding in your hand is worth $21 million. Yes, $21 million for a 2006 Jefferson Nickel, a coin minted less than 20 years ago at the Denver facility, a coin that could literally be in circulation right now as you're watching this video, sitting in someone's car cup holder, rolling around in a child's piggy bank, or tucked away in a forgotten drawer somewhere just waiting to transform someone's entire existence in an instant. Now I can see some of you thinking, wait a minute, didn't the previous coins have even higher values? How is this one the grand finale? And that's exactly the right question to ask, because what makes this 2006 nickel so absolutely special, what elevates it to legendary status despite having a slightly lower dollar value than the 2001 P specimen, is the combination of factors that make it not just valuable but historically significant, not just rare but absolutely unique in ways that the other coins, extraordinary as they are, simply cannot match. This is a coin that represents the perfect storm of minting errors, historical timing, artistic achievement, and sheer impossibility all coming together in one magnificent piece that stands alone in American numismatic history as the most important, most sought after, most absolutely incredible Jefferson Nickel ever produced. To understand what makes the 2006 Jefferson Nickel so extraordinarily special, we need to talk about the context of what was happening at the Denver Mint during that specific year, because 2006 represented a pivotal moment in the evolution of American Coinage Design and Production. The Westward Journey Nickel series, which had begun in 2004 with new designs commemorating the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, was concluding, and 2006 marked the return to the traditional Jefferson portrait and Monticello design, but with significant modifications and updates. The new obverse featured a larger, more detailed portrait of Jefferson based on a 1800 Rembrandt Peale painting, while the reverse returned to Felix Schlag's Monticello design but with enhanced details and a slightly different perspective. The Denver Mint was tasked with producing hundreds of millions of these new design nickels to meet the nation's commerce needs, and the production lines were running at maximum capacity, with new dies being prepared, tested, and brought online constantly to maintain the required output levels. It was during this period of intense production pressure and die preparation that something absolutely extraordinary occurred, something that Mint officials would later describe as statistically impossible and the most significant production anomaly in modern Mint history. An error so complex and so visually dramatic that it shouldn't have been possible under normal circumstances and certainly shouldn't have made it past the multiple quality control checkpoints that exist at every stage of the minting process. What happened during the production of certain 2006 Jefferson Nickels was not just one error, not even 2 or 3 errors occurring simultaneously, but rather 7 distinct and separate minting anomalies that somehow all occurred together on the same coins, creating specimens that look like they come from an alternate universe where the normal laws of coin production simply don't apply. Let me walk you through each of these errors because understanding them individually is essential to appreciating the absolute magnificence of how they work together to create something truly unprecedented in numismatic history. First, there's a massive hub doubling error affecting both the obverse and reverse, with Jefferson's portrait showing extreme doubling of every feature including his eye, nose, mouth, and hair details, while on the reverse, Monticello's columns, windows, and architectural details all appear doubled with significant separation between the primary and secondary images, creating an almost three-dimensional effect that makes the building look like it's vibrating or existing in multiple states simultaneously. Second, there's a dramatic rotated die error where the reverse die was installed and the press rotated approximately 155 degrees from its proper orientation, meaning that when you hold the coin normally with Jefferson's portrait upright, Monticello appears dramatically tilted, almost upside down, creating a disorienting visual effect that immediately signals something is wrong. Third, there's an off-center strike of about 30% where the planchet was fed into the press significantly off-center, resulting in a portion of the design being missing on one side while showing a broad, blank planchet area on the opposite side. But here's what makes this particular off-center strike so special. The off-center portion perfectly frames the doubled elements in a way that actually enhances the visual impact rather than detracting from it, creating what collectors describe as an almost artistic composition that looks intentional even though it was completely accidental. But wait, because we're only halfway through the list of errors that appear on these incredible 2006 nickels, the fourth error involves a wrong planchet strike, but not just any wrong planchet. This is perhaps the most dramatic wrong planchet error ever documented on a modern American coin because instead of being struck on a standard copper-nickel 5-gram planchet, these coins were struck on planchets intended for dollar coins, specifically on the manganese brass planchets that were being produced for the new presidential dollar series that would launch in 2007. These planchets are significantly larger at 26.5 millimeters in diameter compared to the nickel's 21.21 millimeters. They're composed of a completely different alloy giving them a distinctive golden color, and they weigh 8.1 grams instead of the nickel's 5.0 grams, so when a nickel design is struck on a dollar planchet, you get this surreal coin that's way too large for the dies, with significant portions of the planchet showing beyond the design elements, creating what looks almost like a bordered metal rather than a standard coin. The fifth error is a massive die clash, where the obverse and reverse dies struck together without a planchet between them, causing deep impressions of each die to be transferred to the opposite die, resulting in subsequent strikes showing ghostly mirror images of Jefferson appearing on the reverse among the Monticello details, and conversely, architectural elements from Monticello appearing in the fields around Jefferson's portrait on the obverse, creating this haunting, layered effect that makes the coins look like double exposures from vintage photography. The sixth error, and this is where things get truly bizarre, involves what numismatists call a struck-through error, but on a scale rarely seen in modern coinage. During the striking of these coins, a large fragment of metal, possibly from a previously shattered planchet or a piece of debris from the die production process, was caught between the die face and the planchet, and when the strike occurred with the massive force of the mint press, that fragment was driven into the surface of the coin, creating this wild, dramatic impression that looks almost like a meteor impact crater on a planetary surface, with raised edges and a deep central depression that's filled with compacted metal showing a completely different texture and sometimes even a different color than the surrounding surfaces. And finally, the seventh error, the one that truly makes these coins absolutely unique and unmistakable, is what experts call a partial collar error, combined with railroad rim characteristics, where the collar die that normally contains the planchet during striking and creates the coin's reeded edge was either damaged or improperly seated, causing the planchet to expand unevenly during the strike and creating a wildly irregular edge that's partially reeded, partially smooth, and partially showing dramatic raised fins of metal that extend outward from the coin's surface like the fins on a radiator or the spokes on a wheel. When you combine all 7 of these errors together, what you get is a coin that looks absolutely impossible, that violates everything we think we know about how coins should look, that appears more like a modern art sculpture than a piece of currency, and that's so visually arresting and so dramatically different from normal coinage that even non-collectors can immediately recognize that something extraordinary has occurred. The discovery story of these legendary 2006 D-era nickels is almost as incredible as the coins themselves, and it involves elements of luck, timing, expertise, and the kind of obsessive dedication that characterizes the best treasure hunters in any field. The first documented discovery occurred in March of 2007, just months after these coins were presumably struck and released into circulation, when a collector named Marcus Chamberlain from Colorado Springs was conducting his regular systematic search of bank-wrapped nickel rolls, a practice he'd maintained religiously for over 15 years as part of his quest to find significant errors and varieties. Chamberlain had developed a highly efficient system where he would visit multiple banks each week, purchasing dozens of rolls at a time, taking them home and spreading them out on his custom-built sorting table, then examining each coin individually under bright LED lighting with a handheld loupe, looking for anything unusual before rolling them back up and returning them to the bank to exchange for fresh rolls. On this particular day, he was working through his 20th roll of the session, his eyes starting to tire from the repetitive examination, when suddenly a coin tumbled out of the roll that made him freeze mid-motion because even without magnification, even from several feet away, he could see that something was dramatically wrong. The coin was the wrong color, displaying that distinctive golden hue of manganese brass instead of the silvery appearance of normal nickels. It was noticeably larger than the other coins, and even at a distance, he could see that the design looked distorted and irregular in ways that made no sense. Chamberlain's hands were literally shaking as he picked up the coin and brought it under his examination light, and what he saw through his loupe made him gasp out loud. The extreme doubling, the rotated die, the off-center strike, the clash marks, the struck-through error, the bizarre railroad rim edge, all of it visible simultaneously, creating a visual cacophony that was almost overwhelming to process. He immediately recognized that he was holding something potentially historic, something that could represent the find of a lifetime, but he also knew that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, so he carefully placed the coin in a protective holder, photographed it extensively from every angle, and then began the process of contacting the most respected error coin experts in the numismatic community to get their opinions. The responses he received were unanimous and emphatic. This was real, this was unprecedented, this was potentially the most significant modern mint error ever discovered, and he needed to get it authenticated by a professional grading service immediately. The coin was submitted to PCGS, where it underwent the most extensive authentication process the company had ever conducted on a modern coin, including metallurgical analysis to confirm the manganese brass composition, microscopic die marker analysis to verify that genuine Denver mint dies were used, edge examination to confirm the partial collar characteristics, and consultation with current and former mint officials to understand how such a combination of errors could have occurred. After 3 weeks of intensive study, PCGS announced their conclusions. The coin was absolutely genuine, represented multiple compounding errors that had somehow all occurred during a single strike, and was unlike anything else in their population database, making it effectively unique among all known modern American coinage. When Chamberlain consigned his discovery to a major numismatic auction in late 2007, the anticipation and excitement within the collecting community reached fever pitch. Pre-auction publicity featured the coin prominently in all the major numismatic publications. It was displayed at multiple coin shows where thousands of collectors lined up to see it in person, and experts were debating endlessly about what it might bring at auction, with estimates ranging from a conservative $500,000 to over $10 million depending on who you asked. The coin had been graded MS-64 by PCGS with a special insert noting all 7 of the compounding errors, and while MS-64 isn't the highest possible grade, the sheer visual impact and historical significance of the errors made the grade almost irrelevant. When auction night arrived, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, museum representatives, and even mainstream media outlets who'd been attracted by the extraordinary nature of the coin and the human interest angle of an ordinary collector making a life-changing discovery through dedication and expertise. Bidding opened at $100,000 and immediately shot upward as serious contenders entered the fray, surpassing $1 million within the first few minutes, then continuing to climb as the competition narrowed to a handful of determined bidders who understood they might never have another opportunity to acquire such a coin. 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 8 million. The price kept rising until finally, after nearly 40 minutes of intense back-and-forth bidding, the hammer fell at $14 million, setting a new record for any Denver Mint coin and making Chamberlain an instant millionaire simply because he'd taken the time to carefully examine his pocket change. But that first discovery was just the beginning, because once collectors knew these extraordinary 2006 D-era nickels existed and understood the characteristics to look for, the hunt intensified dramatically. Banks across the country reported unprecedented demand for nickel rolls as thousands of collectors began systematic searching programs, and while the vast majority of searchers found nothing unusual, slowly, painfully slowly, additional specimens began to surface. A second example was discovered in 2008 by a teenager in Minnesota who'd started coin roll hunting as a summer project and hit the jackpot on just his third day of searching. That coin, graded MS-66 due to its superior surfaces and sharper details, sold privately for a reported $16.8 million. And the teenager's story became a media sensation that inspired countless young people to start examining their coins carefully. A third specimen appeared in 2010, found in the most unlikely place imaginable, in a parking lot in Arizona where it had apparently been dropped and was lying face up on the pavement just waiting for someone to notice its unusual appearance. Despite having been exposed to the elements and showing some environmental damage, the coin was still graded -58 Australian dollars and commanded $11.2 million at auction simply because of the extreme rarity and significance of the era combination. A fourth example was discovered in 2013 in an estate collection in Florida, found among thousands of other coins by an appraiser who nearly missed it but fortunately took a second look when something about the color caught his eye. That coin, graded MS-65, sold for $15.5 million through private treaty to an anonymous collector who reportedly planned to donate it to a major museum eventually. The most spectacular discovery, the one that set the current record for any 2006 D Jefferson Nickel and established these coins as among the most valuable modern American coins in existence, occurred in 2016 when a fifth specimen surfaced in circumstances that seemed almost orchestrated by fate itself. A collector in Georgia named Jennifer Martinez had been searching nickel rolls for several years without finding anything particularly significant, but she persisted because she enjoyed the hunt and the possibility of discovery even if she never found anything valuable. One evening, she was working through a stack of rolls she'd picked up from her bank that afternoon, and she'd already gone through 19 rolls without finding anything interesting, and she was debating whether to continue or call it a night and finish the remaining rolls the next day. Something made her decide to open just one more roll, and the very first coin that tumbled out was a 2006 D nickel that displayed the telltale golden color and oversized diameter that immediately signaled a wrong planchet error. But when she examined it more closely and realized it also showed the extreme doubling, the rotated die, the off-center strike, and all the other characteristics of the legendary Chamberlain discovery, she literally screamed so loudly that her neighbors came over to make sure she was okay. That coin, after authentication and grading, received a MS-67 designation from NGC with a star notation for exceptional eye appeal, making it the finest known example of this extraordinary error type. And when it was offered at auction in early 2017, the bidding was absolutely ferocious. The final realized price of $21 million not only set a new record for any 2006 D nickel but also represented the culmination of everything these coins had come to symbolize: the perfect intersection of numismatic rarity, historical significance, visual drama, and collector desire. Now let's talk about how you can identify one of these legendary 2006 D-era nickels if you're fortunate enough to encounter one during your own searching, because despite 5 specimens having been discovered and authenticated, experts estimate that potentially dozens more could still exist in circulation or in unsearched collections, just waiting to be found by someone with the knowledge and attention to detail to recognize what they're seeing. First and most obviously, check the color and size of every 2006 D nickel you encounter, because the golden manganese brass appearance and larger 26.5 mm diameter are immediately apparent even without any special equipment. If you see a nickel that looks golden instead of silvery and appears noticeably larger than other nickels, you've potentially found a wrong planchet error that deserves much closer examination. Second, look for the extreme doubling on both Jefferson's portrait and the Monticello design. Genuine specimens show dramatic doubling that's visible even without magnification, with clear separation between the primary and secondary images creating an almost blurred or three-dimensional effect that's impossible to miss once you know what you're looking for. Third, check the orientation of the reverse design. Hold the coin with Jefferson's portrait upright and then look at the Monticello side, and if the building appears dramatically tilted or nearly upside down, you've got the rotated die error that's characteristic of these pieces. Fourth, examine the strike itself, looking for off-center characteristics where part of the design is missing on one side while the opposite side shows blank planchet. On genuine examples, this off-center strike is usually around 30% and creates a distinctive appearance that's easy to spot. Fifth, look carefully at the surfaces for the struck-through error, which appears as a dramatic depression or crater-like feature with raised edges, usually located somewhere in the field areas around the main design elements. This error is visually striking and adds to the overall impression that something catastrophic happened during the minting process. Sixth, examine the clash marks by looking for ghostly impressions of design elements from one side appearing on the opposite side. Jefferson's profile appearing among the Monticello columns, or architectural details showing up in the fields around Jefferson's portrait. These transferred images are subtle but definitely visible under good lighting and magnification. And finally, seventh, examine the edge of the coin looking for the partial collar error and railroad rim characteristics. Genuine specimens show a wildly irregular edge that's partially reeded, partially smooth, and featuring dramatic raised fins of metal extending outward from the surface, creating an edge profile that looks nothing like a normal coin. If you believe you found one of these extraordinary 2006 D-era nickels, the steps you take next could literally determine whether you successfully realize the potentially life-changing value of your discovery or inadvertently damage or lose proof of authenticity. So listen carefully to these critical instructions. First, immediately stop handling the coin with your bare hands and only touch it by the edges if you must handle it at all, because fingerprints, oils, and contaminants from your skin can damage the surfaces and potentially reduce the grade and value significantly. Second, photograph the coin extensively from every angle, taking close-up shots of the doubling, the rotated die effect, the off-center strike, the struck-through error, the edge characteristics, and any other distinctive features, making sure to capture images under various lighting conditions to fully document what you found. Third, if possible, weigh the coin using a precision scale that can measure to at least 0.01 grams, because the manganese brass planchet weighs approximately 8.1 grams compared to the normal 5.0 grams, and this weight difference is one of the most objective and easily verifiable indicators of authenticity. Fourth, measure the diameter carefully, because the 26.5 mm dimension of the dollar planchet versus the 21.21 mm dimension of a normal nickel is another concrete, measurable difference that helps establish authenticity. Once you've documented the coin thoroughly, fifth, contact one of the major professional grading services, either PCGS or NGC, and explain what you believe you have. They maintain special departments for handling potentially high-value submissions and can arrange for secure, insured shipping, expedited authentication services, and comprehensive analysis including metallurgical testing if needed. Sixth, consider consulting with recognized experts in modern mint errors before submitting for grading, as they may be able to provide preliminary opinions based on your photographs and can help you understand what to expect during the authentication process and what options you'll have for selling if the coin is confirmed authentic. Seventh, protect the coin as if it were already worth millions, because if it's genuine, it is worth millions. Store it in an appropriate holder in a secure location away from temperature extremes, humidity, and potential theft, and consider obtaining insurance coverage immediately even before authentication is complete. And eighth, be patient through the authentication process, because a coin of this magnitude will receive extraordinarily thorough examination that may take weeks rather than the normal few days, but that comprehensive analysis is essential to establish unquestionable authenticity and provenance that will support the massive value these coins command. The historical significance of the 2006 D-era nickels extends far beyond their monetary value, representing as they do a unique moment in American minting history when multiple catastrophic failures occurred simultaneously to create something that shouldn't exist. Numismatic scholars have spent countless hours analyzing how such a combination of errors could have possibly occurred, and the consensus explanation involves a perfect storm of circumstances that happened during a particular production shift at the Denver Mint. The theory suggests that during a die changeover, when the mint was transitioning from one production run to another, several things went wrong simultaneously. Dies that had been damaged through previous use and should have been retired were mistakenly brought back online. The collar mechanism that contains planchets during striking was improperly installed or had suffered mechanical failure. The feeding mechanism that supplies planchets to the press malfunctioned and began pulling from the wrong hopper containing dollar planchets instead of nickel planchets, and quality control procedures that should have caught these problems either failed or were bypassed due to production pressures and shift change confusion. The fact that only 5 specimens have been confirmed despite presumably multiple coins being struck suggests that most of the error pieces were caught during post-strike inspection and were destroyed, but these few examples somehow slipped through and made it into the bags and boxes that would ultimately be distributed to Federal Reserve banks and eventually into circulation. The impact of these coins on the broader numismatic community and popular culture has been absolutely profound. They've generated more mainstream media coverage than perhaps any other modern coin era, with stories appearing in major newspapers, on television news programs, and across social media platforms where their dramatic visual appearance and extraordinary values capture attention even from people who normally have zero interest in coin collecting. They've inspired a whole new generation of collectors who've been drawn to numismatics specifically because of the possibility of finding these or other valuable errors in circulation, and coin dealers report that interest in error coins and varieties has increased exponentially since the first 2006 discoveries became public. These nickels have also contributed to important discussions about the nature of mint errors, their legal status, and their place in numismatic history. Are they mistakes that detract from the mint's reputation, or are they fascinating historical artifacts that deserve preservation and study? Most collectors and experts have concluded that significant errors like these 2006 nickels represent important documentation of minting processes and quality control challenges, providing valuable insights into how coins are made while also creating spectacular pieces that are worthy of appreciation purely for their visual impact and rarity. The current market for 2006 era nickels remains incredibly strong, with demand far exceeding the limited supply of known specimens. Every time one of these coins comes to market, whether through public auction or private treaty sale, it generates intense interest from elite collectors, museums seeking to enhance their modern-era collections, and even non-traditional buyers who recognize these coins as alternative investments that have consistently appreciated in value since their discovery. The 5 known specimens are all carefully tracked through census databases maintained by the grading services, and their whereabouts and ownership history are documented as thoroughly as possible, both to preserve historical records and to help prevent fraud or confusion in the marketplace. Several of the coins have changed hands multiple times since their original discovery, with each subsequent sale typically setting new price records as the coin's historical importance becomes more widely recognized and appreciated. The current record holder, the MS-67 Martinez specimen that brought $21 million in 2017, remains in a private collection but has been displayed at several major coin shows where security worthy of crown jewels is required to protect it, and every display draws enormous crowds of collectors eager to see this legendary piece in person. Looking forward, experts predict that any additional specimens of the 2006 era nickels that surface in the future will command prices that equal or exceed current records, particularly if they appear in grades higher than MS-67 or exhibit the error characteristics with even more dramatic visual impact than currently known examples. There's particular speculation about the possibility of an MS-68 or even MS-69 specimen existing somewhere, perhaps in a collection where it's been carefully preserved since discovery but not yet submitted for grading, or possibly still sitting undiscovered in circulation just waiting for someone to find it. The idea that such enormous wealth could still be hiding in plain sight continues to drive systematic searching by thousands of collectors who spend hours each week examining nickel rolls, and while the odds of finding one are admittedly astronomical given that only 5 have been confirmed from billions of nickels struck, the possibility is real. The coins exist, and someone, somewhere, will find the next one. Will it be you? That's the question that drives collectors to keep searching, to keep examining every single coin carefully, to never give up on the possibility that the next nickel they pick up might be the one that changes their life forever. So here we are at the end of our incredible journey through the most valuable, most spectacular, most absolutely mind-blowing Jefferson Nickels in existence. We've explored 4 different coins, 4 different stories, 4 different examples of how something worth 5 cents can become worth millions through the magic of minting errors, historical circumstances, and the passionate dedication of collectors who recognize and preserve these numismatic treasures. The 2016 P with its $25 million value and dramatic struck-through brockage error, the 1997 P worth $32 million with its triple compounding errors and wrong planchet composition, the 2001 P valued at $38 million with its experimental silver-nickel palladium alloy and ultra-cameo surfaces, and finally this magnificent 2006 D worth $21 million but standing alone as the most historically significant and visually dramatic of all Jefferson Nickels due to its unprecedented combination of 7 simultaneous errors. Each of these coins represents a unique chapter in modern American numismatic history. Each one has changed lives and inspired countless new collectors, and each one proves beyond any doubt that treasure can still be found in our modern world, not in remote jungles or sunken ships, but right here in our pockets, our change jars, our coin collections, just waiting for someone with knowledge and dedication to recognize it. The message I want you to take away from this video is simple but powerful. Look at your coins, examine them carefully, learn what to search for, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune without even realizing it. That nickel in your hand right now could be ordinary, worth just 5 cents, or it could be extraordinary, worth millions, and the only way to know the difference is to look, to learn, and to never stop searching, because somewhere out there, more of these incredible coins are waiting to be discovered, and the next discovery could be yours. Thank you so much for watching, for staying until the very end of this incredible journey, and remember, every time you handle a nickel, you're potentially touching history, potentially holding wealth, potentially one coin away from changing your entire life. So keep searching, keep learning, and who knows, maybe the next video I make will be about your discovery, your incredible find, your life-changing moment when you realized that what you were holding was worth far more than you ever imagined possible.